Okay. Good morning, everyone. My name is Jacolette Adam. I'm from Exigent Environmental. And today I'll actually be talking, it aligns with Amanda's presentation, which is actually how do we get the finance for implementing the biodiversity principles and biodiversity ideas we have. So I'll be looking at how do we apply those principles in relation to the post-COVID scenario. And can biodiversity finance actually contribute to the post-COVID recovery plan? Biodiversity is crucial to achieving the Sustainable Development Goals, and we specifically look at Goal 14 and 15, which deals with life below the water and life on land. However, there are many others that's also contributing, such as climate change, poverty reduction, and gender equality goals. One of the key biodiversity finance initiatives in the world is the BioFin. BioFin is managed by the United Nations Development Programme and includes 35 current countries around the world to date. BioFin was developed in response to the 10th TBD conference of the parties, which identified the need for better information on the past expenditures and future financing needs, and also for a comprehensive methodology to develop sound finance strategies to significantly reduce the financial needs in the future. This initiative develops evidence-based biodiversity finance plans in order to support countries implement the solutions to reach their national biodiversity goals. It also promotes the use of available platforms to change the way of thinking in terms of biodiversity finance and to try and deliver a better with what is available. It furthermore looks at the reallocation of resources from where they harm to where they help. In April 2020, the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, Biodiversity, Land Use and Ecosystems Program, as well as the UNDP BioFin initiative. Sorry, it seems like, I'm not sure where. I know if someone wants to log in, but anyway, okay. In April, this conference, they were convened as a milestone in the lead up to the COP15. The objectives of this conference were to firstly examine the trends and lessons learned in scaling up biodiversity finance and policy incentives. Secondly, to foster the exchange among governments and biodiversity finance experts of experiences, best practices, and opportunities for mobilizing, tracking, and aligning biodiversity finance. Thirdly, to reflect on the recommendations on biodiversity finance for the CBD post-global biodiversity framework. At the conference, it was stated that COVID-19 will have a wide-ranging global impact. It has health impacts. However, it is much more than a health crisis. It is a crisis with no borders. And a strong conclusion was made that we can no longer afford finance to be an afterthought in the discussions and debates of the environmental conventions. It needs to be at the foundations. Looking at some of the worldwide learnings presented at this conference is very exciting. I will be highlighting a few of the countries and briefly looking into the lessons learned. First of all, Costa Rica. They stated that they actually depended too much on the official development assistance funding for nature conservation, and they didn't mobilize enough funds from a range of resources. One of the good examples is the carbon tax linked to the payment for ecosystems approach, which pays farmers and landowners to protect and restore forests for the carbon, water, biodiversity services delivered by their land. Seychelles have increased the greening tourism increase the tourism sector, greening it, by raising airport service fees, increasing levies on cruise ships and passengers, as well as creation of a biodiversity finance unit within government. In the Philippines, they increased the number of protected areas, which increased the revenue from public-private tourism, as well as a gas and oil fund. In Gautemala, there was good examples of integrating biodiversity into municipal budgets. A pilot finance solution involving results-based budgeting for coastal marine biodiversity management was implemented in 5 municipalities. In Germany, compensation payments are achieved for excessive use of synthetic fertilizers and pesticides, and these funds is then applied to meeting biodiversity goals. In Kazakhstan, currently the farmers are receiving a VAT import tax exemption for fertilizers and pesticides. However, the plan is to cancel this VAT exemption and develop financial incentives to stimulate the use of environmental friendly fertilizers to promote sustainable farming practices. In Switzerland, the removal of direct payments to livestock farmers and increasing the payments to farmers that meet biodiversity goals, such as extensive upland farming, is being considered. The Danone company in Mexico provides financial and technical support to more than 100,000 farmers worldwide in order to create an improved regenerative agricultural principles. These principles improve sustainable soil practices and water management, which again leads to a transformed value chain of strawberries and increase the producer's income. In Sri Lanka, the aim of improving the banking system by implementation of green finance practices through the creation of a sustainable finance roadmap. In the Philippines, an app was created, GCash. Now this offers financial services, mobile payments, and transactions. The customers earn points for doing business in a sustainable manner. For instance, switching to a paperless service or buying sustainable services. These points accumulate to a virtual tree in the app, and they then choose an indigenous tree to adopt. And these trees are physically planted in areas within conservation schemes. The closing presentations of the conference highlighted the importance of mainstreaming. I just want to spend some time on this concept because it's critical for the way forward thinking in terms of biodiversity finance. Mainstreaming is the approach of integrating biodiversity into other systems. Other systems meaning government, such as broader government policies or specific government sectors, the private sector, referring to business models, operations, and practices, and the financial sector, which provides finance to public and private sectors. And these principles of mainstreaming should be developed and implemented on all scales, global, national, local, program level, and even project level. The Convention on Biological Diversity's panel of experts on resource mobilization unpacked the principles of mainstreaming in their third report, and the key items they identified for the strategic framework for biodiversity finance to achieve changes should include the following 3 principles: reduce, generate, and enhance. Reduce referring to the reduction or redirection of resources that harm the environment. Generation referring to additional resources being applied to meet the objectives of sustainable development. And enhancing is the effectiveness and efficiency of resource use. Looking at examples of this, In the business sector, options would be to actually adopt green standards with an agreed matrix and allowing for open and transparent reporting. In the international field, looking at international development finance, it would be the adoption of blue carbon, forest carbon into the regulatory and voluntary carbon offset markets, as well as supporting the regenerative agricultural principles. In the public sector, it could be to enhance the inclusion of biodiversity into sector plans, IDPs, and spatial tools to achieve coherence, all of it working towards the whole of government approach. Delving further into the implementation of the principles of mainstreaming, we are looking at nature-based solutions. These solutions are defined as actions that protect, sustainably manage, and restore natural or modified ecosystems that address societal changes effectively and adaptively, simultaneously providing human well-being and biodiversity benefits. These can include protecting and managing and restoring forests, adopting regenerative approaches to agriculture, building artificial wetlands within cities to reduce flooding, managing catchments in order to provide clean water, restoring natural vegetation to mitigate storm damage. In the current situation, these nature-based solutions need to be aligned to respond to the economic crisis of the COVID-19, as well as to embrace the principle of building back better, as well as the principles of mainstreaming. According to the Global Commission on Adaptation, nature-based solutions are typically cost-effective and offer a triple dividend of benefits. It includes economic gains from immediate jobs restoring and protecting nature to long-term economic growth associated with increasing food and water security, business productivity, and tourism. Avoiding the losses from protecting communities and infrastructure from floods, storms, heat waves will save many countries billions of dollars every year. The societal and environmental benefits that can be gained from cleaner air improves human health and mitigates climate change. The good news is that in the recent few months, there's actually been a lot of commitments worldwide in terms of biodiversity finance. In Germany, a 700 million euro support was given for forest conservation and management. New Zealand announced a $1.1 billion program that aims to create 11,000 jobs through major investments in restoring wetlands and riverbanks, removing invasive species, and improving tourism and recreation services on public lands. South Korea invested a significant amount into forest and river restoration. In America, the Corps spearheaded the plantation of more than 3 billion trees, the building of flood barriers, as well as the construction of recreational facilities in more than 800 parks nationwide. France recently realized the demand for increasing walking and cycling infrastructure, and in cities such as Paris, they are planning major upgrades to their open spaces. In Jakarta and Mexico City, investments are being made into massive tree planting campaigns in order to improve poor air quality, since the studies have shown that air quality increases is linked to a higher death rate from COVID. And then one of the greatest examples is actually the European Green Deal. The European Commission has proposed the basis for a 1 trillion euro.
I have no idea. I'm just leaving the coffee. I'm so shy on my gown. I am the child.
And restoring forests, soils, wetlands, rivers, as well as transforming agricultural practices to make them more sustainable. Firstly, this fund will increase the funding for the transition and mobilize funding to support sustainable investments over the next decade through the EU budget and associated instruments. Secondly, it will create an enabling framework for private investors and the public sector to facilitate sustainable investments. And thirdly, it will provide support to public administrators and project promoters in identifying, structuring, and executing sustainable projects. Although Europe's Great Deal is far from a done deal, a political process is just beginning, during which the vested interests of all parties will need to be managed. COVID-19 has forced us all to reconsider and re-evaluate current practices. Critical to choose policies and practices that support nature. All of this requires a paradigm shift. It's a paradigm shift to work with nature rather than against it. However, all of this is only possible when financial flows are released. Therefore, we require a structural and government-wide approach. Looking at our situation back home in South Africa, we also have a responsibility to recover better. Thus, while we are addressing the critical health and economic impacts of COVID-19, we must not further weaken the climate and environmental systems that underpin our economies and societies. Instead, we need to make decisions and investments that help us shift to a more resilient, nature-friendly approach to future economic growth and development. So, to answer the question whether biodiversity finance can contribute, and is it part of the recovery plan post-COVID, my answer is a definite yes. Thank you.